But without even a moment's hesitation, he agreed and started walking with me. His entire security detail was thrown off guard. But for me, that moment was truly touching. It showed me that this man had courage.
So recently, Narendra Modi, who is India's prime minister, went on the Lex Friedman podcast and talked about his opinion on Donald Trump. And in this video, he also touches on his opinion on the situation in Ukraine and its war with Russia. Now, we all know what a lot of the American political circles think about Donald Trump, but I really wanted to hear what Modi did because it seemed like in Trump's first term, he became closer and closer with Trump as time went on. So let's give this a listen and react to it.
You recently visited the United States and reinvigorated your friendship with Donald Trump. What do you like about Donald Trump as a friend, as a leader?
I'd like to share with you an event that stands out in my memory. Perhaps from that, you'll get a better understanding of the point I'm trying to convey. For example, we had an event in Houston. Howdy Modi. Both President Trump and I were there, and the entire stadium was completely packed. A massive crowd at an event in the US is a huge moment. While packed stadiums are common in sports, this was extraordinary for a political rally. The Indian diaspora had gathered in large numbers. Both of us delivered speeches, and he sat down below listening to me speak. Now that's his humility. The President of the United States sitting in the audience while I spoke from the stage. That was a remarkable gesture on his part. After finishing my speech, I stepped down. And as we all know, security in the US is extremely strict and thorough. The level of scrutiny there is on a completely different level. I went over to thank him and casually said, "If you don't mind, why don't we take a lap around the stadium? There are so many people here. Let's walk, wave, and greet them." In American life, it's almost impossible for the president to walk into a crowd of
Yeah.
thousands. But without even a moment's hesitation, he agreed and started walking with me. His entire security detail was thrown off guard. But for me, that moment was truly touching. It showed me that this man had courage.
And man, this is such a great story. I'm almost in tears, and it sounds so corny, but this is ideally what relationships should be between world powers, at least in the non-interventionist worldview. I mean, you have a rising power in India and a superpower in the United States, and they're two big leaders, two of the most powerful people in the world getting along together and presenting that to the masses. I mean, just imagine what would be possible if that was the case with all superpowers, that was kind of the cornerstone of the relationship between the US and China and the US and Russia and vice versa. You don't have to feud despite all the cultural and political differences. And the other thing you said that I think is pretty cool here and very accurate is that Trump is courageous. And, I've been very critical of Trump on some things, but that's something none of his fiercest adversaries can take from him. And we saw why. I mean, we saw after the attempted assassination in Butler, him banging his fist. Fight, fight, fight. That's the American spirit. And I think that drew a lot of people to him in that moment. It's something that'll go down in history. Americans will remember that forever and how he responded to that. And this is not to kind of, wipe away any criticisms of Trump I have, but I think this was a good summary by Modi and a really interesting point.
He makes his own decisions, but also he trusted me and my lead in that moment enough to have walked with me into the crowd. It was that sense of mutual trust, a strong bond between us that I truly witnessed on that day. And the way I saw President Trump that day, walking into a crowd of thousands without even asking security was truly amazing. And if you watch the video now, you'll be amazed. When he was shot during the recent campaign, I saw the same resilient and determined President Trump, the one who walked hand in hand with me in that stadium. Even after being shot, he remained unwaveringly dedicated to America. His life was for his nation. His reflection showed his America First spirit, just as I believe in nation first. I stand for India first. And that's why we connect so well. These are the things that truly resonate. And I believe that across the world, politicians are covered so much by the media that people mostly perceive each other through its lens.
That is the truth. How can you deny that? I mean, most of the schisms that divide people against each other are through political and cultural lenses. He's absolutely right about that, and I suppose it's probably not no different in India as well.
People rarely get the chance to truly meet or personally know one another. And perhaps third party intervention is the real cause of tensions. When I visited him in the White House for the first time, there was already a lot written about President Trump in the media. At that time, he was still new to office, and the world had a rather different perception of him. Even I had been briefed in many different ways before meeting him. But to my surprise, the very moment I stepped into the White House, he broke all formal protocols right away.
I wonder if they briefed him on his short-term stint with the WWF. That would be interesting.
And then he personally took me on a tour of the White House. As he showed me around, I noticed something striking. He wasn't holding any notes or cue cards, nor was anyone accompanying him to assist. He pointed things out himself. This is where Abraham Lincoln lived, he said. He even explained why the courtroom was designed so long. He would point at the table and tell me which president signed here and on what date. I found that incredibly impressive. It showed how much he honored the presidency.
That's actually really interesting to me because it's really rare that you see Trump during a speech, at least for a general audience, where he makes references to past presidents and past history. So that might be one of the reasons he comes off as non-intellectual and sometimes, anti-intellectual. But if he actually knows some of those things behind the scenes, it makes him a more complex character than I think I would have imagined. So this is an interesting story about Trump for sure that at least makes me intrigued.
And how respectful and deeply connected he was to America's history. I could feel that. And he spoke to me freely, discussing many things openly. That was my experience from our first meeting. Later, when his first term ended and President Biden won, 4 years passed. But during that time, whenever someone we both knew met him, and this must have happened dozens of times, he would say, Modi is my friend, convey my regards. That kind of gesture is rare.
Hmm.
Even though we didn't meet physically for years, our direct and indirect communication, our closeness, and the trust between us remained unshaken.
He said that you're a much tougher, much better negotiator than he is. He said this recently when you visited.
If you know Trump's history, that would be an incredible compliment, actually.
What do you think of him as a negotiator? And what do you think he meant about you being a great negotiator?
Now, that's not something I can comment on, since it's his graciousness and humility. It is very kind of him that he openly appreciates me on various occasions and in different contexts. But about negotiation, I always put my country's interests first. That's why in every forum, I speak up for India's interest, not to harm anyone, but in a positive manner. And because of that, no one takes offense. People know that if Modi is present, he will strongly advocate for these things. After all, the people of India have given me this responsibility. For me, my nation is my high command, and I will always honor their will.
You've also had a bunch.
One of the interesting things about Modi's admiration for Trump to me is that Modi's in an interesting position, sandwiched in between a man in President Trump who he clearly respects, and the BRICS alliance of 10 countries that include, China and Russia, countries that the US government has saber rattled with, even Trump and Russia. Trump has been much more bellicose toward Russia than, his deepest foe would ever admit. So Modi's kind of caught between two worlds in a way, so it's really interesting to see him have such admiration, not only for some BRICS leaders, but also for Trump.
Of productive meetings with several other folks on your visit to the United States: Elon Musk, J.D. Vance, Tulsi Gabbard, Vivek Ramaswamy. What are some things that stood out from those meetings? Maybe key takeaways, key memories.
Look, I can say this. I have observed President Trump both during his first term and now in his second run. This time, he seems far more prepared than before. He has a clear roadmap in his mind, with well defined steps, each one designed to lead him toward his goals. I also had the chance to meet members of his team, and I truly believe he has put together a strong, capable group. And with such a strong team, I feel they are fully capable of implementing President Trump's vision based on my interactions with them. I met several people: Tulsi Gabbard, Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk. And there was a family like atmosphere. Everyone had come with their families. As for Elon Musk, I have known him since my time as chief minister. He was there with his family and children, so naturally, the atmosphere felt warm and friendly. Of course, we had discussions and we talked about many different topics. Now, with his Doge mission, he is incredibly excited about how it's progressing. And honestly, it makes me happy too, because when I took office in 2014, I wanted to free my country from the deep rooted issues and harmful practices that have crept in. And I'll continue striving to eliminate as many of them as I possibly can. For example, after I took office in 2014, I observed that back then we weren't part of many global discussions, not like how President Trump and Doge are being talked about today. But let me give you an example so you can see the kind of work that was done. I noticed that the benefits of certain government schemes, especially welfare programs, were being exploited by so many people who never even existed in real life.
This is so interesting given the recent revelations that a lot of the people on the Social Security payroll were of age where they couldn't have still been living. I think that there was something like 20 million people, at least, were registered as over 140 years old or something like that. Someone can check me on that in the comments, but it's interesting to know that, that happens in other places too. It is kind of the nature of redistributionist schemes, is that when you implement a system like that, there's infinite incentive for bureaucrats to take advantage of it or make errors when it comes to the application of it, because we know that government won't efficiently do what it purports to do, except for rob you of your liberty.
There were ghost names, pensions being issued to fake people. Widow pensions were being granted even before marriages took place, and disability pensions were given without any real disabilities. Then I launched a scrutiny process, and you'll be shocked to know what we found. 100 million people. 100 million people. That's 100 million fake or duplicate names that I removed from the system. And because of that, we saved massive amount of money. Then I introduced direct benefit transfer, ensuring that every rupee sent from Delhi reached the rightful person without leakage. As a result, my country saved nearly 3 trillion rupees that would have otherwise ended up in the wrong hands. Just because of direct benefit transfer through technology, we eliminated middlemen, ensuring transparency in the system. I also introduced the GEM portal for government purchases, which has helped save both time and money. It has increased competition and improved quality. In India, we had an overwhelming burden of compliances. I eliminated 40,000 unnecessary compliances and removed nearly 1,500 outdated laws that served no purpose.
It's so interesting because it almost comes across like Modi is trying to like impress an American audience, which he probably knows Lex's audience is largely American, though he has lots of international viewers, about like kind of his experience in applying the same lessons that, you know, Elon Musk is trying to do with Doge. It's almost like he's trying to qualify himself for American approval, which honestly is a good sign because it's not just in the US where people are getting robbed blind and schemed against and, you know, their wealth is being squandered on idiotic and, you know, crazy government projects. So I just found that interesting.
So, in a way, my efforts have been about freeing governance from unnecessary dominance and inefficiency. And naturally, when bold changes happen, just like Doge's mission, they become a topic of discussion worldwide. I represent the country that is the land of Mahatma Gandhi. These are the great souls whose teachings, words, actions, and behavior are entirely dedicated to peace. And that is why, culturally and historically, our background is so strong that whenever we speak of peace, the world listens to us. Because
Then I want you to speak a hell of a lot more. Because that is what we need, especially when it comes to subduing the wreckage caused by the US world empire and what drives it. So, Mr. Modi, I want you to speak more and more and more. And Modi just comes off so even keel. I'm very impressed by that, and I have known a lot of Indian people like that from working with them and such, but he's just so laid back, and I think there's actually something like pretty infectious about it.
India is the land of Gautam Buddha and Mahatma Gandhi, and Indians aren't hardwired to espouse strife and conflict. We espouse harmony instead. We seek neither to wage war against nature nor to foster strife among nations. We stand for peace, and wherever we can act as peacemakers, we have gladly embraced that responsibility.
Amen. And isn't there something the US needs? There's nothing more than that the US needs. That was just so well put, and I really wish that continued to be the American mantra, that we follow the words of Thomas Jefferson when he said peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none. And when Washington warned that, you know, embroiling yourself in these entangling alliances just guarantees that your country inherits all of the enemies of your allies. You know, he roots it in Gandhi and Indian culture, and that's fantastic too. I don't care what direction you come from toward that objective, but man, that is what America needs.
Returning to your example, I have a close relationship with Russia and Ukraine alike. I can sit with President Putin and say that this is not the time for war. And I can also tell President Zelensky in a friendly way that, brother, regardless of how many people stand with you in the world, there will never be a resolution on the battlefield. The resolution will only come when both Ukraine and Russia come to the negotiating table. Ukraine may hold countless discussions with their allies, but it will bear no fruit. Discussions must include both parties instead. Initially, it was challenging to find peace, but now the current situation presents an opportunity for meaningful and productive talks between Ukraine and Russia.
It's kind of interesting to hear him say this because Narendra Modi has been notoriously, I don't want to say silent necessarily, but he hasn't really chimed in on his opinion on this Russia Ukraine conflict before now. As far as, at least to my knowledge, if you disagree with that, let me know in a comment. I could be wrong on that. But again, it kind of makes sense why. He's sandwiched between wanting warm relations with the West and the trade that's involved in that, and all the ties that kind of bind his country with the United States, but he's also part of BRICS, which is an organization, kind of quasi-alliance that, it's not really clear what the ultimate objectives are. Some people think, there's circles within BRICS that really want to create an alternative currency even, beyond having kind of a strategic alliance. So it kind of makes sense why he's held off. So it's just really great to hear him say that negotiation is needed. I think basically the whole thinking, reason using world thinks that now.
There has been a lot of suffering. Even the global south has suffered. The world has been grappling with a food, fuel, and fertilizer crisis. So, the global community should unite in the pursuit of peace. As for me, I have always maintained that I stand with peace. I am not neutral. I have a stance, and that is peace. And peace is what I strive for.
Well, there's Modi. So that was really interesting. I think that he brought up a lot of redeemable qualities of Trump. And you guys know, if you watch the channel, I haven't been the biggest Trump advocate, especially lately. I think it's just been a horrible week for Trump in about 4 regards. But I don't think a lot of people can take away from some of the good things that Modi said about him. And as far as me, from an America First, like a true America First perspective, not that America First that actually means, well, Israel first most of the time and maybe the scraps can be left to America. But from a real America First perspective, I want the warmest possible relations with India as a trade partner and, a proud culture that we know political and cultural differences exist, and yet we're not rattling sabers with India essentially anywhere in the world. So Modi's an interesting guy. He's a little bit controversial in his own country. He's something of a kind of Indian nationalist that, wants a stronger centralized government. And to that, I certainly wouldn't want that in the United States. But he's really popular with some circles, very controversial and unpopular with others. But he strikes me as more of a genuine guy than a lot of people. And I don't know if that's just because of his culture or the way he speaks, but it's really interesting to see. I think he's right on as far as the negotiations to have a peace between Ukraine and Russia. Hopefully that comes to fruition. I become a little bit more skeptical lately as aid got restored to Ukraine this week, but we'll see. Let me know in the comments below. What do you think about Narendra Modi? Do you like him as a leader? Do you think he's admirable? What do you think his best quality is? And what do you think about his opinion of Donald Trump? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and until I see you next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, no more empire. Peace out. I'll see you guys next time.